that the things are perfectly in alignment, perfectly held in place by gravity, and that the sun even produces this 1,000,000-mile-per-hour solar wind that inflates a protective bubble. You think God wasn't up there going, you know what, these guys need some protection. Boop. I'll just create a little bubble. 1,000,000-mile-an-hour solar wind to protect us. They say that this solar wind even influences how things work here on Earth because of the way things have come together. The human body is another one. Did you know that your body has to have a certain level, pH level, where things get really out of balance? That your body has to have a certain hormonal level where things get really out of whack really quick. That each of us in this room this morning have a body temperature very close to, if not exactly, 98.6 degrees, and that's regulated by the different things in your body, but especially the level of water. That your body is made up mostly of water. That those things are held in perfect balance. Science, and some people who would discount God would say this. Some people who discount God would say that this whole thing was a cosmic accident. That it was just a fluke, that everything exploded from nothing and came into being, and then perfect order was created from that. It's a great theory. The only problem is that you can't recreate that. Scientists can't prove that something comes from nothing. And they can't prove that anything ever comes into perfect order out of nothingness. I've heard this illustration used before, and I'm going to change it a little bit. But some people have said that if you went into a junkyard and you planted a couple sticks of dynamite, then the Big Bang Theory, without a God involved in the picture, would be like taking those two sticks of dynamite, putting them in the junkyard, and when the explosion went off, a perfect 1967 Ford Mustang Candy Apple Red with a 351 Cleveland would be presented. Okay, so I'm just saying, for me, some people say airplane, or it would have been a Mustang. I'm just saying, it would have been a Mustang. Okay, but it's never been proven. I mean, there's no way that something comes from nothing without a creator or a designer. Would you agree with me on that? And so, God, when you look around, He doesn't really need our defense in a whole lot of things if we think about it. He pretty much defines Himself clearly. And if God is God, and if Jesus is who Jesus said He was, which we have great reason to believe, then we don't have anything to fear from scientific truth, do we? We don't have anything to fear. Now, there might be some new ways that we understand or interpret, okay? But never, I don't believe that ever is science going to disprove our God or disprove our Christian faith. I don't think that's possible. Faith is not blind acceptance. I want you to look at this. Faith is not blind acceptance. Faith includes three things. Number one, it includes the Bible that tells us the what and the who. Okay? Our Bible tells us the what and the who. Science sometimes brings understanding to the how. Okay? We found that out when Galileo said, hey, guess what? I just discovered that, the earth isn't the center of the universe, and the Pope summoned him for trial. You can't be saying these things. Well, it's true. Okay? So sometimes science helps us to understand the how, and then we make some adjustments in how we understand these things. But our hearts complete our faith by believing in the supernatural things that we cannot understand. We can't leave this part out. God is a supernatural God. He is beyond our understanding. In fact, the whole definition of supernatural is that it's not natural. It means it's not scientific. It's not measurable. God cannot be measured. He cannot be qualified. He cannot be recreated in a lab. And so, because of God's supernatural qualities, there's a faith thing that comes into being. There's a heart issue involved in all that. If we could have the worship team come on up, we'll get ready to close here in a few minutes. This past week, I found something out that I never knew before. And As most of you know, I didn't pay a lot of attention in high school, okay? So they might have said this, but I don't remember it. I was looking up some stuff about Charles Darwin because I wanted to know some more about this guy. Charles Darwin was actually a guy that was studying to become an Anglican clergyman. He was going to be a pastor, okay? He was also a scientist. And the article that I read was an encyclopedia article. It said he did not doubt the literal truth of the Bible early on in his studies, but that as he started to understand the adaptation of species, he saw that as evidence for design. Okay? In other words, as he learned things about science, it kind of helped him to generate more faith in those areas. But as time passed, he became critical of the Bible as history and wondered why all religions shouldn't be equal. But that didn't destroy his faith either. He still believed in God. Okay? Here's what God, and this is what I think gets a lot of people as well. To Darwin, and this is on the screen, to Darwin, natural selection produced the good of adaptation but removed the need for design. Now get this. I was surprised to read, and he could not see the work of an omnipotent deity in all the pain and suffering. That when he looked at nature and he saw that, and in this particular example they said when a wasp has to wrap up a caterpillar and paralyze it so that it can be live food for the wasp's babies, he said he began to question how a loving God could fit the picture of a world with such suffering. How many of you have ever run into somebody who questioned God in a world with suffering? How many of you have ran into that? Okay? I see a lot of hands going up. A lot of people ask that question. See, it's amazing to me that Darwin, who came up with the theory of evolution, that really the breaker for him was not science, the breaker for him was suffering. That when he came to that, he said, I can really reconcile God with all kinds of scientific things, but when it comes to a world that is filled with suffering, I'm not sure I understand that. And as we look at our world, we can't hide from that. 25 million people just in Africa are dying of AIDS right now. That this morning, as we meet in this church, thousands of children will be orphaned as their parents die this morning in Africa. We can't discount the reality of suffering. When I was talking to that lady on the phone, I like to call her Psycho Barb. When I was talking to Barb on the phone, I said, what about the Holocaust? I said, what about the atrocities against women and children all around the world during war times? What about the gas chambers? Weren't those horrific times when we could say, man, if there's any indication of the end times, this is it? That she was basing everything on a recession in America. Because we can't, go out and buy a steak, we have to buy a cheeseburger. I'm like, come on, man. There is real suffering in the world. I've been hearing about the drug wars in Mexico and the hurricanes and the earthquakes and the tsunamis and the things that destroy life. And so the question that I want to make sure we know how to answer is, how does a loving God fit into the picture of a suffering world? How does a loving God fit into the picture of a suffering world? And the fact is, science can't explain suffering. They can't qualify it. They can't figure it out. They can't make an excuse for it. But here's what I understand the Bible to say about suffering. And so, as you think about this, I want you to ask yourself this question. What would I say if someone were seeking a relationship with God and they were devastated by suffering? And they wanted to know how I can believe in a God that would allow that to happen to them. I've had those questions myself as a pastor.